We have a question from our comment section. This is Jay McElveen. Who do you guys think there will be an issue with not enough minutes for all the guards? That's a good question, Dan. I'll let you take it first.
Hey, what's up, Jay? He was actually our sponsor.
Yes, sir.
I mean, it's I
Five
don't
star
think
prop.
so. Yep, for properties. I don't think so. I think kind of going back into the development and the culture that he's built. I think each player trust Coach Sampson so much that they know that their time is coming. And so whatever that he's preaching to them, I think they're 100% bought in, because when their number is called, and it will be called at some point, I think that they trust. So I think early on, Coach Sampson just kind of lets the story of the game tell itself. There'll be some games where some of the guards off the bench play more minutes potentially than some of the starters, and vice versa. So I don't think overall there will be a lack of minutes. I think he will rotate the guards, will get them a lot of experience early, and about time December, January rolls around, he'll be fully set in his rotation. And unless injuries happen at any time, then he'll have to change it. But I don't see it being a problem with the guards and the minutes. I think they'll all get minutes. But I think they really just have full trust in Coach Sampson and what he's building and what he has built. Because you just look, when your time is going to come. Marcus isn't going to be here forever. Tremont isn't going to be here forever. And those next guards coming up is Terrence, Ramon, Emmanuel. And so I think they're learning so much from Marcus, and what you hear from them say that, and Tremont and Jamal. And so I think I know, of course, they want to play, but I don't think they're really worried about minutes. I think they just worried about being ready when their number is called, letting Coach Sampson down, not getting his bad side, seeing his bad side, and really just being ready.
Yeah, and Dan, I think to add on to your point, I 100% agree. But I mean, it goes back to recruiting, and something that Calvin Sampson preaches and reiterates numerous times. He's told us as a part of the media, just in terms of they recruit kids that, whether it comes the whole process, they recruit kids that want to be in Houston, that they believe in, and just overall are a perfect fit for what Calvin Sampson and his staff are looking for. So I'm sure, and it's something that Calvin said throughout the past, he never promises any players when they come here that they're going to have, play a set amount of minutes and they're going to have a specific role, which again, it just goes back to the word for the program that's buying into the culture. And the culture goes back to not being as much of a me mindset and much more of what's going to be the benefit for the team. So I agree 100% with you, Dayon. And I'm toss it over to another question. This was asked by John Lopez on YouTube. Who is the X factor for this team? Which another good question. And I'm thinking there's a whole bunch of different players that could be candidates to be X factors. I think we should split. Yeah, I think for the preseason, or in the preseason heading into the regular season, I think we might be able to, or at least I'll split it into the forwards and guards, or the bigs and the guards. And when it comes to the guards, I think that X factor is going to be, honestly, Terrence Arsenault, because we know what we're going to get from Jamal Shed. We know what we're going to get from Marcus Sasser. We know what we're going to get from Tremont Mark. I believe Jamal Shed, Marcus Sasser, and Tremont Mark. We know what we're going to get from those three guys. And then after that, it's kind of who's gonna step up and kind of be that fourth guard. And obviously Ramon Walker has experience. He showed some big plays last season. It's going to be kind of crucial to see what his development has been like from last season. So he could be another candidate. But I think Terrence Arsenault in particular, it's a player to watch. And we heard that clip, and something that wasn't in this clip specifically, but he said during his availability, which, by the way, shameless plug, if you do want to watch the full video, be sure to check out the channel and subscribe. That's why you follow us here on Pawd Slama Jama for the full clip. But one thing that Arsenault said is that he had a conversation with Calvin Sampson, and they talked about his role heading into it, which, just hearing Arsenault talk, it looks like his relationship with Calvin Sampson is really good. And just overall, he said, he's pushing him hard. You heard it from that clip right there. He felt the practices were much tougher than the scrimmage was. So I think he could very easily be an X factor for the guard position. I think in the front court, or when it comes to the bigs in particular, I think it's going to be Reggie Chaney, and the reason for that, it'll be what he can bring, essentially from a standpoint of that. We know that he's going to be that veteran presence. We know that he can rebound, but one, like you mentioned, what's his health status look like, and two, what kind of is the role that Houston envisions? Because, like you said, there's going to be a lot of opportunities to kind of move around Reggie along with Jawan Roberts and Jarris Walker.
I'm gonna start with the front court since that's where you left off. I'm gonna say with Jarris, because
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned the scoring from the guards, and you talk about some of those post players, and I think Jarris is the best scorer out of those group. And you look at the production that they got last year from their post, and throughout the history, they've gotten production from their post. And who's going to bring that this year? Who's going to be that player to do that? And I expect Jarris to do that. I expect them to feature him in the mid post area, allow him to go 1-on-1, whether it's face up or backing his player down, whatever he chooses to do. So I think his offensive production is going to be key on a game in, game out. Like you just said, we know the guards are going to produce, and I think he's just going to need to be consistent. And I know he's a freshman. I know it's a lot to ask, and Coach Sampson always kind of tempers down expectations for freshmen and know they have a learning curve to do so. But I think his athleticism and his size to be able to run the floor, just do different things. I think he's going to be an X factor in the front court. Throughout the guards, I've been going back and forth while you were saying, Andy. I would have to say, I'm battling between Jamal Shead and Tremont Mark. Those are the two I'm thinking about. I'm gonna go with Tremont. I think he's the X factor for the guards, because Marcus is going to draw. He's going to be at the top of the scouting report for every team on every game. He's going to give you on a game in, game out. And with Jamal, he's going to be steady with his playmaking, his defense, running the show. I think Tremont has a huge role not only to produce offensively, but to also do playmaking when Jamal isn't on the floor. I think he's a really good playmaker. And another thing he does really well is get to the free throw line. But I think he's so hungry to prove to the outside world how good he is. I've been following him since high school, and I know what he can do, but it almost seems he's a forgotten piece because of the success Houston has had over the last year, and he hasn't been in the forefront of that. And so I think he has a huge chip on his shoulder, and he's going to have a huge impact on the team, and I think he will do that.
Yeah, no, that's a great choice, especially from what we've seen already during the red and white scrimmage, what we've heard about what happened this past weekend in Texas. It certainly seems like Tremont Mark, or what happened in San Antonio against Texas, it certainly seems like Tremont Mark is much more comfortable heading into the season. And again, now that he has that shoulder injury behind him, I absolutely agree, because you can't go wrong, and that's a perfect choice just in terms of what he brings to the table. And again, going back to Jamal Shead, we know what he brings from a facilitator standpoint, from a playmaking standpoint, and then obviously, of course, we know that Marcus Sasser is kind of the rock, that he can do it all. He can shot create for himself, he can create for others. And most importantly, like you said, he's going to draw in all the attention from the opposing defenses. He's going to be the top priority for opposing defense against Houston. Is there anything else you wanted to add before I go to the next question?
Yeah, I wanted to add one thing. Why I was debating between Jamal and Tremont is because we've been hearing Jamal's been working on his jump shot. I think that's going to be key, because teams are going to want to keep Tremont out of the paint, and also Marcus and Jarris, everyone out of the paint. And so I think he's going to have a lot of open looks, specifically at three, in which he's going to have to be able to knock that down consistently, in which I think he can do that. And so just wanted to add, that's why I was who should I decide between Tremont and Jamal? But I think Jamal is going to do everything else exceptionally well. He isn't going to have to shoot a high percentage from three to still be one of the best point guards in the nation.
No, but that's a great point. If we get to a point where Jamal Shead is knocking down that 3-point shot consistently, I don't know how opposing teams can guard Houston, especially when you have their starting five on the court. But that's a kind of a perfect segue for this other question by John Lopez. What will be this year's team's weakness? Which again, that's really difficult, but
Let me get this one. I think I would say when you play against teams like a North Carolina who have Bangkok, or like a Kentucky who has Oscar. I can't remember his name. I don't remember how I want to pronounce his first name is Oscar. He's on a preseason All American team. Or teams like Gonzaga who have Drew Timme. I think without having the size that we have last year with the Josh Carlton, those teams who have 6'10", 6'11", 6'7" foot centers may be an Achilles heel. I know we play that monster defense where we trap the post and force them to give it up. So maybe that won't be a weakness. I don't know. Let me think about that. That's a good question. What about you, Andy?
No, it is. I think, and I don't know if you can outright call it a weakness. I think you'll see the biggest question heading into the season is how quickly do the freshmen, especially in particular, Jarvis Walker, Terrence Arsenault, and Emmanuel Sharp, how quickly are they comfortable being a part of the Houston rotation? How quickly can they pick up the defensive thing? I think that's going to be the biggest question mark, especially when we're focusing in on Jarvis Walker, because if he gets to a point where he picks up the defensive side of things and how Houston wants to run things, the quicker that he does it, the much, much better Houston overall as a team is going to be. I think if that's one area where opposing teams could exploit, it's something that Kelvin Sampson has said. And again, it doesn't have anything to do with skill. It's much more, they're freshmen. This is a process that they have to learn. But honestly, if I had to pick, I'd go with that. And that's being really nitpicky. And I guess maybe you could go when it comes to again, that center position. What's that going to look like? Is it going to be Reggie Chaney? Is it going to be Juwan Roberts? I mean, could it be JVA Francis? I think that's the one position that you could consider a weakness. But again, it's tough.
It's tough. Now thinking about it, I'm gonna have to say 3-point shooting. Just looking at it right now, coming into the season, you got one knockdown shooter who's a sniper, and that's Marcus Sasser. The rest of the players can shoot, but I don't know if you would put them in a category as a shooter. And we saw last year the Achilles heel from the team at times were shooting, specifically 3-point shooting. And so I think that can be a weakness, but when you got the likes of Marcus Sasser, it's hard to say that can't be a weakness. But I think consistency on a game-to-game basis, teams may want to allow Houston to shoot from the outside of Marcus.
No, and that's a great point. And I mean, something to that Kelvin Sampson said. He says they hang their hat on defense, rebounding, and taking care of the ball. He says that gives them the best chance to win. So again, going back to your point, there's going to be times where their shots aren't falling. But the thing about Houston is that they don't really they emphasize on the other side when it comes to exactly. So even if I mean, choose just again in that clip he mentioned the Villanova Elite Eight game loss where Houston was abysmal from shooting on the floor, particular 3-point shooting, and they had an opportunity to win that game. And that just goes to show how tough that Houston team is. We're seeing a lot of comments, a lot of other people chime in. I think King Jaja makes up a great point where he says size will be an issue. Again, going back to that center position when it comes to Reggie Chaney, and who kind of will be that when it comes to Reggie Chaney, J1, and JVA Francis. I think this is interesting. Avoid potential bad losses to St. Mary's and at Oregon's. Playing old veteran teams early in the year will be a good test. Avoiding scoring drops is also important. So he kind of hit on some of the points we've talked on, but I think that's an interesting point. Again, playing old veteran teams will be a good test because again, Houston's going to be relying, in particular, when it comes to maybe not relying on the freshmen, but the freshmen are going to be playing some important roles down the stretch. Maybe not so much early, but the quicker that they pick it up, or the quicker they get comfortable in the Houston system, could be a testament to how dominant Houston becomes.
Yeah, I think, but also I think we gotta have to remember you got a Ramon Walker who earned valuable minutes coming off that bench, and maybe he can. Well, I just want to see the rotation. It's hard to see what I say without really seeing the rotation. And so I think they're embedded to the culture already. It's just about transitioning to the college game. I think that's the transition and the speed. Yeah, the speed, everything that goes around in the game. I think that's something we'll have to take in account. But like Jaja said, I think size could potentially be a factor, but I think JVA, he has good size, and I don't know his wingspan, but it may be 7'4", 7'5". Coach Sampson called him one of the best shot blockers, so I expect him to play a huge role. But I agree with you, Jaja. I think that was almost one of my weaknesses, and I think it can be probably at times, but with the way they play their post defense and they trap everything in the post, it's hard to beat Houston with the dominant post player. It's really hard.
Yeah, and Norbert chimed in as well. He said this team's weakness will be the time it takes to mesh together as a cohesive team and the inexperience from some of the freshmen. Followed it up by saying there will be an adjustment period and yes, consistent three-point shooting. Good point, Dayon. So, I mean, they're all valid concerns, and I think it's interesting. But Dayon, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. I feel like those concerns are much more, maybe nitpicky is not an exact word, but they're valid concerns. But I feel like I'm comfortable that they won't be as big of a problem. It could just be that, again, going back to what Kelvin Sampson, the coaching staff have done, like you said, the proof is in the pudding. I feel like they'll be able to figure it out relatively quick. What say you?
I think so too. Because it isn't, I don't see a game where you'll have all three freshmen on the floor at one time. Or
yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So let's keep in mind, they'll be on the floor with a veteran guard who has experience. And they won't be asked to do much. And so there is a transition period for sure. But that's a great point. I think the time it takes to really gel together as a team. But that's why you have the best coach in the country, because that's where coaching comes in. And so I full trust in the coaching staff. And you got the talent, you got the players, you got everything you need. And it's just about putting it together.
Absolutely. Last question here before we wrap things up from John Lopez. Which game are you most looking forward to this upcoming season? And I'm going to start, and you've got to circle December 10th against Alabama at Fertitta Center, a rematch of what happened last season. They played in Tuscaloosa against Alabama, came down to the final possession. We had the controversy at the end of the game. Was it a goaltend? Was it not a goaltend? I think that's, especially when it comes to non-conference, that's the game that you got to have circled, and it's going to be a home game. I know there's been some fans that have complained about the lack of marquee matchups for Houston at Fertitta Center. That's going to be one of those marquee matchups, and it's going to be, I think that's going to be the game that you have to have circled. What say you?
I don't disagree with you at all. I think that's a good game for sure. That circle, but I'm gonna go with in the non-conference Oregon. I'm gonna go with non-conference Oregon. Last time we played Oregon on the road, we lost against that game. I don't know why the guard name who plays for the Celtics now, his name just skipped my mind. Really good guard. But anyway, I think that's a good test. They had a good recruiting class. They had a down year last year, but their team with a ton of talent. But, I mean, it's Memphis, of course. I mean, of course, Alabama, non-conference, but it's Memphis. I mean, that's the biggest game, in my opinion, that I can't wait to see Memphis. I got that one circled.
And you were referring to Peyton Pritchard, correct? The last time they played at Oregon, and I mean, yeah, that was a tough battle. It was a game that really Oregon was in control for much of it, and Houston was kind of just hanging around. They could never kind of get over that hump. I think another game that you can throw in there that really a lot of people aren't really talking about, just because of how dominant Houston was against them this last season when they played at Fertitta Center, but this time they have to travel on the road and play at Virginia, which, I mean, that's not going to be an easy task either.
Is it? And they're transitioning from a new coach who their coach retired, but they have a coach who's been in the system. And I agree with you, Andy. It's not going to be an easy test either. Virginia is a good program, just like Houston, a recent national championship winner. And so that's definitely not going to be an easy game.
Absolutely. And I know I said John Lopez was the final question. King George's will be the real one. And I'm just curious to get your thoughts on this. Looking ahead, do you think the current size of the Fertitta Center will be an issue transitioning to the Big 12?
I don't think so. I often thought about the size of it even before going into the Big 12, but it kind of plays into Houston's favor because of you can pack it out. It's not as big, and the noise can be really impact the game. And so I don't think so. One thing I will say, I think they need to expand the student section. I don't think it's close enough to the floor. You see some of the other student sections. I mean, I like it, but I don't like it. That's just nitpicking. I think it could be closer to the floor. The students, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it could be bigger. It won't hurt, but I don't think it'd be an issue. I think one thing it will be an issue is when they travel in the Big 12 and go see some of those crowds, because you playing in the American, the crowds you see in the American are not going to be equivalent to the crowds that you're going to see when you get in the Big 12.
Yeah, I mean they've shown it in some of the past when they have had to play in tough crowds. At Wichita State, at Cincinnati, you can throw in at Memphis in there. But I mean, even going back to last season when they had to play at Alabama, I think the way they've been able to respond in those environments, I think that's pretty it's key, and it's certainly a valid concern. But I think it's interesting to see how they've been able to play in those matchups. And then going back to your point about the student section, I know you said it was nitpicky, but I think they're kind of, I wouldn't say stuck, but when it comes to in particular the student section, it's already on the floor. There's not really much more they can do to expand unless if they make more bleachers, or I don't know. It's interesting to think about. I think
Or maybe,
the one
one thing they maybe could do is put an additional student section behind one of the basketball goals. You
Yeah,
have
they
the one on
could.
the floor, then you could potentially have like an area for like behind the basketball goals. Because you watch college basketball, you see student sections behind the goal doing all kind of crazy stuff.
Right. Right. No, I mean, that's a valid point. I hadn't thought of that. And I think the biggest thing about Fertitta Center is if they could switch the cameras around where you could actually see the student section. But again, that's being nitpicky.